Hey, Kyle Beach here at Y Camp, coming at you with some great ideas for this spring. The weather's getting warmer, the nights are a little bit warmer, it's time to do some backyard camping. I love camping out in the backyard of my family, so I wanted to share some of my tips and tricks with you so you can have a great backyard camp out. So follow me as we learn how to turn a tarp into a different kind of tent, a couple different kinds of tents actually. We're also going to make a hammock out of a bed sheet, and I'm going to show you how to make a temporary backyard campfire. So stay tuned. Okay, so what we're going to do, I'm going to take some supplies we've gathered here. We've got a little bit of rope, we've got a tarp. I found 5 round things. In this case, it's rocks. Could be marbles. I've got a hickory nut here. Anything that's round, we're going to show you a trick to not have to use those grommets that tear out on the tarps. You're going to need some tent stakes. I've just made some out of some sticks that I found. And you're going to need one pole, like a broomstick, a hockey stick. In this case, I just found another stick. So we're going to unfold this and I'll show you how to do it. Okay, so the little holes here are called grommets, and as we pass the rope through, you'll see that it's putting the force of that rope on a very small area, and this tends to pull out very easily. A really inexpensive way to do that, something that people used for a long time, is you just get a small rock, and we're going to tie a slip knot. You can refer to one of our earlier videos about knot tying to learn how to tie these. I'm going to take this smooth rock, I'm going to put it around like that so it gathers up the tarp. Now I put the slip knot around it and pull it tight. And now, when I pull on this rope, I'm pulling from a lot more surface area in that tarp. The round, smooth sides are not going to tear through, and I've got a much stronger anchor point. So we're going to do that to some different points. Okay, so what we've got is a rectangular tarp, and we've put 5 anchor points in. We've got the front 2 corners, we've got one in the middle, and then in the back, we're not using the corners, we're using the next grommets in, or the next spot near the grommets where we've attached these. So these are in the middle third and 2 corners. So now we're going to put these back 2 stakes in the ground, and then we're going to show you how to turn this into a tent. If you're using homemade tent stakes like this, you want to be very careful so they don't break, you don't want to get a splinter. And I try to avoid using my foot. That bends a lot of tent stakes, particularly the metal ones. So now I can just tighten this down. And remember, if you can't tie a knot, well, tie a lot. Okay, we're gonna move to the front. I'm gonna show you how to do that. Okay, so now we're gonna lift the front end of the tent. You'll see we've got anchor points at the 2 corners and in the middle. And what we're gonna do is I've got my stick here. This is gonna be the pole that holds the tarp, soon to be a tent, up. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to very slowly pull this up. I'm pulling it tight against the back. I'm looking for the angle that this makes to be anywhere from 45 to 60 degrees. So I'm going to pull it to about there. That's my height, and now I know where to stake out those 2 corners. So now I'll take this and I'll tie it to my pole. I like to wrap it a couple times just to make sure it's secure. And you want to pull it square to, or perpendicular to the line between your 2 stakes in the back. You don't want it off at an angle. So right about there. And now I've got a second section of rope here, and I'm going to use this to tie this out to the ground. You could use the same rope, but I like to have the rope that's going here a bit higher. That way there's just less to trip over and it's a little more out of the way. See, we've got this pole is being held up. It's perpendicular to the line back there. And this is kind of starting to look like a tent. Now it's time to carefully stake out these 2 corners and see where we can go from there. So for these corners, this is really the last tricky part. I want to make sure that I'm pulling against that back corner, as well as keeping this pole vertical. That will tell me where I need to put this stake. So once you got that, go ahead and put your stakes in. Remember, put them in nice and careful if you're making homemade ones. And you can always come back and tighten it up later. So it's important to start out, we're just looking to get it up. We can come back, tighten it up. We're gonna do a close-up of the knot that I'm using to hold these in because it's kind of neat. So I'm gonna carefully put the stake in the ground. Okay, now what I'm doing is I'm staying low, I'm wrapping around once. I'm putting the rope over top, and through this little gap right here, I'm just pulling a loop of it through, and that makes a slip knot. And then I'm just putting the loop through again, And you can do it a couple times if you want, creating a daisy chain. That's gonna be nice and secure, and then when you're done, it unties nice and easy for you. Okay, so now this is looking like a tent. What I'm gonna do now though, is I'm gonna take the line between these 2 points, and I'm gonna tuck this extra tarp in. That's gonna give you a little bit of a floor. It's also gonna help keep wind from whipping under this thing. You'll notice we've staked it fairly low to the ground. And then you're ready for a night in your backyard. So this is a 5x9 tarp, which will be big enough for 2 people in a standard kind of backpacking setup, or 1 person with room to spread out. If you've got a bigger tarp, you'll just scale it up, the same anchor points, everything's the same, you'll just fit more people. So stay tuned, we're gonna show you another way to set this up in your own backyard. So what we've done is we've changed our anchor points a little for this next one. We're using the 4 corners, and we've used the marble technique, or round rock, to put an anchor point directly in the center. So now we're gonna set this up in a traditional lean-to fashion between 2 trees. If you didn't have 2 trees, you could make your 2 tie-outs really anything that's gonna be stationary until morning. I would not recommend using a vehicle for obvious reasons that vehicles tend to move, particularly in the morning. So once you found your 2 anchor points, in this case it's these 2 trees, you're gonna wanna measure the angle of your tarp. Again, we're looking at about 45 to 60 degrees, and that'll tell us how high we need to tie our tarp. Easiest way to do that is lift up one side, find your angle, let it drift down, and when it's at that angle that you want, then you know that's how high you need to tie your tarp. So we're gonna tie this out. Rather than tie the stakeout points we've put in directly to the tree, which could abrade, maybe cause that to cut, we don't want that. I'm gonna use a separate rope to tie a loop to a tree, then I'm gonna tie the tarp to that loop. So what I've done is I've taken a section of rope, I've just done a simple overhand to make a loop. I'll demonstrate that here. We just gather it up, over, and through. So I've put that in the middle, and I've put another one at the end. So follow me over to the tree and we'll tie it up. So I know that I want this loop, this middle one, to be about here. And then, when we come back here, I've got this loop that I can then put this rope through, pull it tight, and we can use that same knot that we've been using of taking it behind like that, putting it through on a nice slip knot. That way, tomorrow morning, we'll be able to get this knot undone instead of having to cut a good rope. Okay, so we've got it rigged now. We don't need it super duper tight right away. Remember, you can always go back and tighten your ropes later. If you make it too tight to start with, you might rip it, or you might just find out that your angles are off. So now we're gonna come out, I'm gonna pull this, looking again for a good, 45 to 60 degree. I'm gonna carefully put my stake in the ground. We're gonna tie it off. Now on the final corner, you wanna pull tight from your point here, as well as tight from there. So you're pulling at an angle to make sure that all of your angles are nice and snug. So you can see where we've added this tie-out point to the middle. This is a really neat use of this marble technique. And what that's gonna allow us to do is put a line out to help pull this from the middle and help keep it up. Let's turn around to the front side and see what it looks like. Well, now you've got a nice cozy lean-to. It's gonna keep the wind off us from that direction only. Nice open front. You're gonna be able to hear all those nice night sounds, like maybe some screech owls. Because those live in town, you know. And it'll also keep any little rain off you that might come through. So stick with us, we're gonna learn about how to make a hammock out of a bed sheet. Okay, so we've turned a tarp into 2 different kind of shelters, one an enclosed tent and one a lean-to that you can camp out in your backyard. Next, we're gonna take a bed sheet, with parent permission of course, and we're gonna turn it into a hammock. What I've got here is I've got a standard bed sheet. You do not wanna use a fitted sheet. We want the top sheet with the nice square corners. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna unfurl it and take the long end, and I'm gonna gather it up like so. And then I'm gonna tie a simple overhand knot in that end. And we wanna make sure this knot is as close to the end as we can get it. So I've got it here, and I'm gonna pull from this end, mostly, to get it nice and tight without sacrificing too much of the length of my hammock. So there, got a nice knot. Now this is gonna make a great kid-sized hammock or a shorter adult. If you use a larger bed sheet that's longer, that will obviously give you a longer hammock, or you could get fabric from the store, do the same thing. You'd want about 7 feet finished product, so you'd want about 8 feet of material if you were making one for a maybe a 6'6" adult or something of that nature. So now I've got my knots tied at both ends. Now we need to put some rope on those. Now we need to be a little careful with the kind of rope we use. We want to make sure that the tensile strength and the working load of the rope is strong enough for what we're going to do. The ropes that you saw earlier in this video have about a 60-pound working load, so that's not going to be enough to hold me up. So we're looking at something that's got at least a 200-pound working load. I like to use parachute cord. Sometimes this is called 550 cord because it has a tensile strength of 550 pounds, which is going to give me a working load that's plenty for what we're going to do here. So I'm going to tie some paracord onto the ends. So what I've done is I've cut about an arm's length, maybe 2 feet of this paracord. You can see true paracord has, this is kern mantle rope, just like climbing rope. There's an outer sheath and the inner braids. This is 7-strand paracord. What I'm going to do is I'm going to hold it over like this, and I'm going to just tie a simple overhand knot to make this all come together in a tight loop. Again, trying to get this knot as close to the end as possible so I'm not wasting rope with those silly little ends. So now I've got a loop. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here and I'm going to tie what's called a lark's head knot. I'm going to be on the inside of this big knot, bring this over here, take the knotted end, pull it through that loop, and you've got yourself a lark's head. I'll demonstrate that one more time. Put it over top, bring your other end around, and through, and that's a lark's head. Okay, so now that we've got it tied with that lark's head knot on both ends, we've got to find a spot with 2 trees or 2 solid anchor points. We want something that's longer than the hammock. You want it at least, when you stretch it out, at least 1 step away. So that's a good distance there. And that's a good distance there. If it's too close together, our hammock's not going to make that nice curve that's so comfy. I'm going to show you how to use one rope to tie both ends rather than having to cut a good rope any more than we have to. One thing we want to make sure with our hammock is that we're not too high up on the ground, because if we fall, the farther we fall, energy equals mass times velocity squared. So the farther we have to fall, the faster we're going to accelerate, the more force we're going to hit, and it's going to hurt a lot more. You also want to check underneath your hammock to make sure any pokey things that you might land on are out of the way. I like to put my hammocks at about hip high. That way when I sit in them, I'm about here. I'm getting all the comfort with less of the danger. So an easy way to set this up, we're going to use a toggle system. So we need a little kind of short beefy stick here. I'm going to tie that same slip knot again. I'm going to put it right over this toggle. Now this is to my long rope that's going to tie across the tree. When I want to secure this to the hammock, all I've got to do is pass this through like so, and now it's secured. So that's how we can use a toggle. So you can see here I've just wrapped the rope around the tree a couple times. We want to make sure we wrap it around more than once so we're not causing damage to the tree. They actually sell nice sheaths that help protect the trees, but for one night it'll be fine. So I've got the toggle through there. It's wrapped around the tree twice. I brought the rope back over to this side, and I'm going to put this toggle through like so. And we don't need to worry about this rope here, because as we sit in the hammock, it's going to sit lower than what this is, and this could be a nice place to like hang your sunglasses or something. So it's important to test your hammock before you start to sleep in it, because as you can see, sometimes the rope is going to stretch and you might have to raise it up a bit. So ease into the hammock, real easy, and then just sit back and enjoy a night under the stars. Now for this next section, before we begin, I want to make something very clear. You can only do this with parental permission and supervision. That's permission and supervision. So one of the fun parts about a campout is, of course, roasting s'mores. But we don't all have access to fire rings and grates and some of those things in order to safely contain one in our backyard. So if your, again, parents deem that it's safe, I'm going to show you how to turn a can like this. This is an old coffee can into a small portable fire pit, or what some people call a hobo stove. The tools we're going to need for this, we can use a church key can opener. You could use a nail and a hammer. You could use a drill with supervision, of course. I'm going to use the can opener on my Swiss Army knife. Now, fire needs three things to burn: heat, air, and fuel. The fuel is the sticks that we're going to put inside this. The heat will come from the match and then from the fire itself. We need to create a way for air to get in. The air will not have to travel too far to get to the bottom to burn. So I'm going to put some holes along the bottom. And we can do that quite simply, like this. You can see I'm putting them at a little bit of an angle, and I'm spacing them out less than a centimeter or so. So now we've got holes all the way around the bottom. This is going to allow air to circulate at the bottom of the fire. What we're going to want, though, is a convenient way to light this. If you're using one of those stick lighters, that's an easy way to get down in there, but if we're going to use a match to get our hand down in there, it's not going to be as safe. What we can do is cut a small door to then light it from the side. So stick with me as I get that cut. So you can see we've cut a little door. Now you want to be extremely careful because these edges are extremely sharp. If you use something like a shear, you can come back with a nail file. You can make these a lot less jagged. I've bent this outward, that way I've still got a nice central chamber here for our sticks. So we're going to load this up and get a fire going. So we're not going to need very big sticks for this. We're looking for things that are going to burn very efficiently. Stuff like this, I'm going to collect a little pile, break these down, and once I've got a pile, we're going to put them in there and show you how to light it up. Okay, so we're going to need a little bit of tinder. We've got some crumpled up paper. We're going to put that in, making sure it's close-ish to the door. I've got my real thin sticks. Just going to drop those in. Doesn't have to be quite as official as it does because this can's going to help that heat circulate, so we don't need to worry about a fire lay typically. And we're going to put a few bigger sticks in there just to get it started. Now, something to remember, we need to have a safe place to have a fire, but we also need to have permission, not just from our parents, but from your local government. Make sure you check to make sure that there's no burn ordinances in effect in your neighborhood before attempting this. So we've moved to a place where underneath is going to be safe from the fire. Remember, this is going to get very hot both around and underneath. So we move from that wooden deck out here to a concrete. We're going to light this up. So this is how you can have a nice cozy campfire in your backyard without having a major fire grate or any large fireplace. It's going to keep the heat contained, not take a lot of sticks. Perfect for roasting a marshmallow. So as the fire's dying down now, you can see that it's contained all of these coals. That's one of the reasons why we don't want to make this door too big. This has helped keeping our fire contained, keeping it a little safer. We don't have those coals spilling out, potentially catching other things on fire. We want to give this lots of time to cool down. Okay, lots of time to cool down. This aluminum is very hot. Those coals are still burning. When it's fully cooled down though, you can take this and pour those coals into some water or pour water on top of it to make sure they're out. And then this can get recycled and the coals can go in the trash, or you can put it in the garden to help your compost. Bonus video, your homemade hammock can also double as a satchel. Put your stuff in the middle, throw it over your shoulder, take those loops, put them over the opposite knot, and you're good to go. So I hope this has encouraged you to get out in your backyard and experience the night in your neighborhood, camp out, look at the stars, roast a s'more, have some of that fun. Just as a reminder, Y Camp, we're here to serve and we are a go for this summer, so be sure to click the link and register today.